Hey everybody, my name's Michaela and today what we're going to do is go through the process of sewing one of my Crazy Daisy tote bags. This is my first ever pattern that I've released, so I'm super excited and I just love how these bags turn out. All of these little petals right here are pockets, so they go all the way around the bag just like this. And it's super handy to have that many pockets. Sometimes it's a little annoying to have that many pockets, but even the ones on the side are pockets. There are also some pockets on the inside of the bag, right in here. So when you print out the pattern pieces, it kind of looks like this. You can see that there's a dotted line around each of the pieces, and that's what we want to cut out. This page right here gives you a little guide on the layout, but you can just cut on these dotted lines. Some of the pieces have little stars in the corners, so those are just there to help line up the pieces after they've been cut out. So for example, these pieces here would be cut out and then you can just tape the two stars together so it creates a whole star. I've already got my pattern pieces cut out just because I've made this a couple of times. But once you've got them all taped and cut, the final pattern pieces, the ones that I don't have here, will say how many of each you need on them. For example, this one says cut 2, unfold, stuff like that. So for like the main piece of the fabric or the exterior, you're going to cut 2 out of your solid color and then 2 out of your lining material. And you're just going to keep doing that for each piece, going along with what says on the pattern piece and in the instructions. I've already got my pattern pieces cut out, so what I'm gonna do with these is just give them a quick iron, and then I need to cut out some batting to go inside of the bag. This bag is gonna be for one of my coworkers, so I do want it to look like the blue bag I showed you earlier that has that like quilt batting in it. So we're gonna do that as well, and then we can actually start sewing and putting the bag together. So I definitely should have ironed my fabric before I cut the pattern pieces out, but I was just being way too lazy. But oh my gosh, look how satisfying it is just to get all those wrinkles out, especially when it's played extra fast like this. So yeah, I cut out my fabric first and then I went back and just ironed all of my extra pieces. And the purple pieces actually dyed, which is why they're extra wrinkly. After I did that, the first step is going to be marking the top seam allowance for these petal pieces. So what you're going to do is you're going to trim off this top seam bit. I already did it, which is why I taped it back on so I could cut out more pieces. But once you've got all that white trimmed off, you can just take a pen, chalk, whichever, and trace along that line. And you only have to do that to 2 pieces rather than all 4 of them. This is going to make sure that when you are sewing those curves, the curves are going to be nice and smooth. This is my kitten Nova. She likes to help me while I'm sewing. And once you have those 2 pieces, you can cut out some batting. Again, this could be done kind of beforehand, but I did it as I was working on the bag. And again, I only used 2 pieces of batting, so like 1 piece for every 2 pattern pieces, just so it's not too bulky. So I cut out 2 pieces of batting for the petals and then 2 pieces of batting for the purse body, and then just 1 piece for the side portion, just because it's going to be one long piece of fabric. Once you've got all of that cut out, I stack the pieces together with the batting on the bottom and then the 2 petal pieces right sides together with that line on the top piece. And then I just stitch right on that curve nice and slow with a straight stitch. A nice tip for this is if you're having a hard time going around that curve or trying to sew a curve while not picking up your presser foot, then you just want to shrink your stitch length really small. I think mine's at about 1 millimeter, and it just helps you sew those curves without having to pick up your presser foot every 2 seconds. And then I just lift it up and pivot once I get to those corners, and sew the side edge as well. And then once I've done that twice for both pieces, I'm going to trim these that seam allowance. Again, a nice tip is to use pinking shears because it creates those notches for you and it saves a lot of time and hassle. But if you don't have pinking shears, you can just go around and snip little notches in the seam allowance. With my regular scissors, I'm just going back in and cutting as close as I possibly can to that thread without actually cutting the thread, and that's just going to help after you turn the petals out to make sure that the seams aren't super wrinkly. What I might have done next time, or what I'll do next time, is just create an extra little stitch at those corners. So instead of pivoting right after one petal and starting the next one, just do one straight stitch just to give a little bit more room for the fabric to relax into the seam rather than want to bunch up kind of how it is right here. But if you just work it out and you use some heat and you use like a chopstick or a pen or something pointy and long and straight, then you can pretty much work those seams out. The nice thing is too, once you go on to the next couple of steps, you're going to stitch over those corners anyways, so a lot of it is going to be hidden, and you can always pick the better side to be facing out and then the worst looking side to be facing in towards the bag, and no one will ever know. And then once I get this pressed and all those seams as flat as possible, then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go in with a top stitch. The top stitch I like to do about 1/8 of an inch away from that edge, just going around that whole curve and the side notches as well. And you can do that for both pieces. After that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take that original pattern piece, again, if you have that top line seam or the top seam ripped off, and you're going to trim along one of the dotted lines on the curves, one of the outside curves, and then you're going to place this piece right on top of your pattern and then trace along that edge, and that's going to be one of the seam lines. You're going to flip the pattern piece over and do that on the exact same thing on the other side, and then what you can do is just stitch along those lines as well, making sure you're starting on the outside of the fabric and kind of catching that outside edge. And once you have those stitched, you can place the petal pocket piece on top of the outer piece, just one layer, and then again you're going to take your pattern piece. You can also just use a straight edge lining up the center seam and the bottom center notch, but I just use the pattern piece since I have it. You're going to trace a straight line and then you're going to sew the petal pocket piece to that outer piece of the bag, and that's what's going to help kind of create that initial pocket separation. So you can do this for both sides, and then we can move on to the centerpiece. So that centerpiece, what I like to do is trim off the top seam allowance again, this time making sure to go through the edge onto the other, or onto the bottom edge, making this shape. And then you're gonna cut out a piece of cardboard that's gonna match the exact same shape. And then with the batting, what you wanna do is you wanna cut out a piece that matches like that cardboard template rather than the outer template. And then very, very carefully and slowly, you're going to take your iron and iron over the top edge seam allowance, creating a nice curve. And again, make sure you're being careful and just going nice and slow. You can always use a basting stitch to pull that and gather that top edge rather than using an iron, or with using an iron. I just use an iron because it tends to be a little bit faster. And then once I kind of have that outline, I fold it over and work that edge down and just add the batting. Then what you're going to do is you're going to place this piece on the front panel, lining up that center notch, and then just pinning that piece around the edge. I like starting at that center and working my way towards the outside edge. The piece, the end of the piece should be roughly 1/2 an inch away from that notch that's at the side of that center. And what you want to do is just pin it and top stitch around it. I miss cutting the top stitch, but this, what I'm doing right now, is called grading the seam, and it just reduces that bulk on the bottom of the bag. So I start with the back layer and I trim that back layer pretty close to the seam, about 1/4 of an inch, and then I have to use a seam ripper to separate those two pieces. And then I move on to the next layer. So I start with that back piece of the petal, and again, I trim it another 1/4 inch from the previous layer, going through the seams and removing the batting. And I'm gonna do the same exact thing for that bottom piece as well, just cutting the petal layer about 1/4 inch away from the previous one, making sure that I'm not cutting through the batting or the yellow fabric on the front. And again, this just helps reduce the bulk of the seams, and it creates almost like a nice gradient effect from where you stitched everything. But it is optional if you find that it's too complicated or you just don't want to do it. Or if you find that your fabric, like the yellow fabric, is really sheer and you can kind of see the edges from the other side, you can always skip this step. Then I just trim up some of the extra pieces. So now starting on the sides, what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the side petal pockets, and similar thing to that front, a lot easier because now we only have one petal, but you're gonna cut out the batting, you're gonna remove the trim line or the seam allowance on top of that pattern piece, and you're going to transfer that edge onto 2 of the petal patterns. And then same exact thing before with the outer panels. You're just gonna stack those with the batting, and then the 2 petal pieces right side together with the drawn piece on top. And here comes Nova again. The sewing machine that I'm using is the Baby Lock Brilliant, and I just got it for Christmas last year, and I'm really loving it, especially that knee pedal. It's so nice and easy, especially when you are sewing curves like this, because you're not constantly having to lift up the presser foot and adjust everything. You can just keep on sewing, and I've almost forgotten what it's like to sew with an actual presser foot. I feel very spoiled with this one. Plus it has all of the buttons up top for like back stitching and everything. I'm just top stitching those petals similar to what I did with that top piece, just 1/8 of an inch away from that top edge. And I'm going through and doing that to both of them. And then what we'll do is we'll start combining the side pieces. For the side panels, I start with that base color with the hearts pointing down, and then I'm gonna layer the petal pockets on top of that. So you want the good side facing up, and then what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the bottom portion of the petal with the good sides facing down, lining up the hearts again, and just stitching all of those together right at the bottom. And what that's gonna do is that's gonna keep that pocket piece facing up when you flip down the bottom of that petal piece, if that makes any sense. But it'll make sense if you just keep watching and follow the instructions. So I'm just gonna do a straight stitch down at the bottom, and then what I'm gonna do, again, similar to that center front piece, I'm just gonna grade the seam by trimming that top purple layer real close to the seam line, and then that middle purple layer kind of in between the purple and the tan, just to make it a nice smooth transition from all of those layers of fabric. After I do that, I'm gonna do it to both sides, and then I'm gonna take that center yellow panel and put right sides facing together for both pieces, pinning them together, and again, sewing a straight stitch across the bottom. And this is gonna complete that outer panel that's gonna make up the side of the bag. Once you have that completed, you're gonna line up that outer panel with the front and back panels. I like to start at this bottom seam where the yellow and the purple meet, just to make sure that those seam lines line up when we're stitching the whole bag together. And then you can kind of evenly distribute the rest of the fabric along like the bottom of the curve and the side curves. It's okay to pull on these pieces and kind of move them around where they need to be, just to make sure that those seam lines do line up. Sometimes this can be a little bit wonky just depending on how the pieces ended up, but you should be able to finagle them enough so that the seams match up and it doesn't look too bad. And then on the side petal pieces are supposed to be slightly lower than the front and back petals, so that's expected. But again, you can kind of tug however you seem fit, making sure that all of those making sure that all of the sides line up and that everything is nice and smooth. It's a flower, so it's a very organic shape, so it doesn't have to be perfect, which is nice, and it makes it a great bag for a beginner because you have a little bit of leeway and no one's going to be looking that close at your purse. I promise. Everyone's just going to notice how cute and bold and fun it is. They're not going to notice if your seam line is like 3 millimeters away from where it's supposed to be. And then I just sew along that curve, and what I'm gonna do again is take my pinking shears and trim along the edge, especially along the curve. These help. Those spots where we add the 2 pocket pieces can get kind of bulky, so just take your time cutting that. And what I like to do is over that seam, I like to backstitch it a few times just to make sure that we've got a nice solid stitch and that it's not going to go anywhere. But once you finish the one side, then you can repeat the same exact thing to the other side, lining them up at that yellow and purple seams and then going all the way around. And then once you have that, you can flip the bag over, and congratulations, you just finished the outer portion of the purse. Next, all you have to do is the inner liner and the straps, and then it'll be done. Okay, to start on that inner liner, what we're gonna do is work on the pocket first. So I'm just gonna take those 2 rectangle pieces, right sides together, and stitch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance around the entire piece. I'm gonna leave about a 3-inch gap on the top of the rectangles. Not that that matters too much, but that's gonna be where we're gonna flip the rectangle inside out or right side out. You can snip off the edges to make sure that the edges are not bulky when you flip the rectangle right side out, and then you just want to press around those edges. To sew that top line up, this is a perfect opportunity to use some of those fun, funky stitches that you have on your sewing machine. So right now I'm just using a scalloped stitch, and I'm not even bothering to pre-stitch that open and close. I'm just using the scallop stitch to stitch it close. And it works really well. I've done this with all of the purses I've made so far, and it looks super duper cute, and it's really exciting to have another opportunity to use a fun stitch. And then what I'm gonna do with that pocket piece is I'm gonna line it up along those 4 dots that's on one of the inside pocket panels. And then again, I'm just gonna stitch around the bottom and side pieces using a straight stitch, and I'm gonna stitch a line straight down the middle. You could totally make up your own pocket widths. You could change it, make it longer, shorter, narrower, etc. So a couple of lines, if you want to put some pencils in there, you can really customize it how you want it to be. Once I finish with that pocket piece, I'm just going to sew the side lining on, similar to what we did with the panel on the exterior of the bag. This time we do have that batting. Mine I had to cut into 2 pieces because I didn't have a piece long enough, but if you have 1 piece, then it would be a little bit easier towards that center line. And I just repeated it for the other side to complete that inner piece. If you can do it to the outside, then it's super easy to do it to the inside. And then to put the 2 pieces together, I just slide the exterior piece right sides together to the interior piece. A little confusing, but if you watch what I do, it's pretty easy to see. And then I'm gonna pin around that top edge, making sure that I line those side seams up as best as I can. And similar to what we did with that pocket piece, I'm just gonna sew all around that top edge about 1/2 inch away, leaving roughly a 3-inch gap in one of the side panels, just so that we can flip the bag right side out. After you've finished sewing that top seam, you can flip that bag out just by pulling the exterior piece out from the inside. It's kind of a funny and awkward thing to do, but it's not too hard once you can get that inside piece down into the outside piece. It can be kind of a hard thing to do the first couple of times you do it, but if you just hold onto the top edge of the bag and smush that inner lining down in there, you can shake the bag out a little bit and then just pull and press onto that top seam, and then you can just press that top side down with the iron and it ends up looking pretty nice. Again, this is a great time to use a fun stitch. So I think in this situation, I end up using this squiggly line over there, and you're gonna just top stitch around the top edge of the purse. You wanna start roughly 1.5 inches away from that edge seam allowance, whichever one, doesn't really matter, just because this is where these straps are going to be placed. So if you backstitch over this a couple of times when you're starting and ending your stitch, or if the stitches don't end up, it really doesn't matter, just because this strap is going to cover it, so it ends up working out really well. But I just take my time making sure that the two edges are folded nice and tight against each other so that you don't have rolling happening when you're trying to stitch this seam closed. You can use pins if you want, just to help and make sure that the two edges aren't kind of slip sliding around each other, but I'm a bit lazy, so I just kind of hold it and go nice and slow. But there you go, nice curvy edge. Onto the straps. So for the straps, I like to cut a 1.5 inch interfacing. This is a medium weight interfacing, but you can use quilt batting, you could use heavyweight interfacing, whichever you prefer. And I just cut 2 pieces of these that are the length of my straps. And once I have those, I go over to my ironing board and I just re-iron this piece of the strap to make sure that it's nice and flat. And after that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fold the fabric right down the middle, and again, use the iron to press a really nice seam that's going down the entire middle of the strap. Once I have that, I'm gonna open it back up and I'm gonna lay this interfacing with the glue side down, 1/2 inch away from the edge of the strap seen in the video here. And I'm gonna do that all the way down for the entire strap. You might have to trim off a little bit of the extra interfacing, but that's totally okay. Again, making sure that it's 1/2 inch away from the edge of the strap piece. Once you've got that ironed down, you're gonna roll over 1/2 inch from the side that has the interfacing, and you're gonna iron that nice and flat, and then you're gonna do the same exact to the other side as well. This side's a little bit trickier because you don't have the interfacing to act as a guide, so you can use a ruler and mark 1/2 inch, or you can just kind of eyeball 1/2 inch, whatever works best for you. But again, you're just gonna iron that down, and then once you've got both of those 1/2 inch pieces rolled over and ironed, you're gonna fold the strap back in half, making sure you're matching up those edges, and again, giving it a nice good press. The iron is your cheat to making sure that the straps are going to be as easy to sew as they possibly can be. So I highly recommend that if you don't own an iron, just go out and get yourself one. Mine I got at the Goodwill for like $5, and I've been working with it for years. To finish the ends, what I do is open up the strap, and then I fold open that right side and fold down that top 1/2 inch. Then I'm gonna fold the strap back in half, making sure that that left side is still folded, and I'm gonna take that open right side and tuck it under the little flap that we created. It's a little tricky the first couple of times, but after you do it and practice, it becomes easier and easier and ends up with a really nice edge. And you can do that on both sides and then just stitch around the entire strap. I like to start at the opening and then start sewing the side that's open. And what I'm using is I have a 1/4 inch presser foot that's mostly made for sewing quilt seams, but it works really well on cases like this because you're able to get a nice quick straight line all the way down the strap, and it always ends up being a perfect 1/4 inch from the edge. Once you've got both straps done, we're going to sew them onto the bag. I like to measure over 1.5 inches and then measure down 1.25 inches, and that's where we're going to position the strap. Again, there's some good diagrams on the actual written pattern, but what I like to do is I like to just sew a stitch across the top and the bottom of where that strap meets the bag. And again, this is a great place to use a funky, fun pattern. So I like to use this kind of star bolt stitch because once you sew it, they actually end up looking almost like little flowers. The first one I did was like the bigger stars, but it ended up being too big and it took a lot of time to sew and a lot of thread that I ended up switching it to the smaller version of the star that has like a straight stitch in between some of the stars, and it just went a lot faster and used a little bit less thread. And then after that, you're done. Here's my wonderful coworker, Micah, modeling the bag. She just happened to wear the most perfect purple sweater that matched the purse. This one was made without any sort of interfacing, and it's all one pattern, but I've kind of changed the pattern from horizontal and vertical just to give it a little bit of a different flair, and I really like how both of them came out. I like the no interfacing because it kind of just resembles a normal tote bag, but I also really like the plush one just because it reminds me a lot of like the quilted stuff that I like to do, and I think you could do like a lot of fun as far as patchwork, you know, different petals. Each petal is a different color. I think that would be super cute. The size is a pretty standard size for a tote bag, I would say. It fits like sketchbooks really easily. You could put like your computer in it. You could put your iPad in it. And then there's plenty of space in all of the pockets for phone, wallet, keys, all that good stuff. I designed the bag to have a bit of a longer strap just because I'm really tall and I don't like it when the bags on like a tote bag come right underneath my armpit. So yeah, and you can shorten this strap or elongate it to whatever need. Everything is like a PDF printable on my Etsy. So once you buy the pattern, you'll get sent to a link to where you can just download it. And there's two different files. One of them is the instructions and one of them is the actual pattern pieces. Some of the pieces you need to cut out, like the bigger shapes, just because it won't fit on one piece of paper. Other ones, I've tried to make it so you're cutting as much or cutting as least as possible and just taping the pieces together, because I've found when cutting patterns, that tends to be the easiest, plus it saves on paper. You can string keychains through there. I eventually would like to add like a addition to the pattern that has like fun little keychains to match. So like a leaf or like a beetle or some sort of bug, and like the keychains would be like a zipper pouch. That's my goal, but that will come after. Milo came to say hi. This is Milo. So the pattern is on sale on my Etsy, and I could put the link down below. And yeah, I'm super excited about it. I think it would be a really good pattern for like a beginner. Or in the pattern instructions, there's a sheet of paper that just has like the outline of the bag. So the intention for that was you can print that out, color it in with markers, cut fabric swatches, etc., just to kind of play around with what pattern you'd like, because I do like where the flower kind of pops out, but I also just really like the one where it blends in all together. So yeah, possibilities are endless. If you are interested in sewing this bag, just go to my Etsy and download the file. And then if you wanted to tag me, you could tag at Mickey Nelson Studios, and I will try to put it in my social media page, whether that's Instagram or YouTube or wherever. Even if you just wanted to share it to your friends to pass it along, I would be super appreciative because it is hard to get your patterns out there and noticed by the masses. But again, if you want to sew the Crazy Daisy tote, the pattern will be in my bio, and it will also be linked down below. Thanks.